They searched for the monster for 5 long nights. The hunters sharpened their stone spears. The elders kept the fire burning until sunrise, and no one dared to sleep alone. Every morning, something had changed. The trees stood in different places. The hunting trails had disappeared, and even the river no longer flowed where it had the day before. The tribe believed something was hunting them in the darkness, something silent, something invisible. So on the 6th night, one young hunter refused to close his eyes. He wasn't searching for an animal or another tribe. He wanted to discover why the forest itself seemed to come alive after sunset. What he witnessed before dawn became a story his tribe would never forget. Thousands of years ago, long before cities, kingdoms, or written language, a small tribe wandered across endless grasslands in search of a new home. Their hunting grounds had become empty, rivers were shrinking beneath the hot sun, and every day the journey grew harder. The children were hungry, the elders struggled to keep up, and even the strongest hunters had begun to lose hope. Then, just as they believed they would have to turn back, they discovered a forest unlike anything they had ever seen. The forest looked almost magical. Towering trees reached so high that their branches hid the sky. Crystal clear streams flowed between giant roots. Colorful birds filled the air with songs, and bushes overflowed with sweet berries. Deer wandered fearlessly through the undergrowth, and fresh animal tracks covered the soft earth. To the exhausted tribe, it felt like paradise. The chief smiled for the first time in many days and ordered everyone to make camp. If food and water were this plentiful, perhaps they had finally found a place to call home. Before sunset, the hunters carefully marked the surrounding area. They carved symbols into tree trunks using sharp pieces of stone, stacked small piles of rocks beside hunting paths, and tied strips of animal hide around several branches so no one would lose their way. Satisfied that everything was prepared, the tribe gathered around the fire, shared their evening meal, and fell asleep believing tomorrow would be the beginning of a better life. But morning brought confusion. One hunter walked toward the stream to collect water, only to stop in disbelief. The stream was gone. He searched the area again until he finally found it, flowing much farther away than he remembered. Thinking exhaustion had clouded his memory, he returned to camp, but before he could speak, another hunter shouted that the marked tree had disappeared. Everyone rushed to investigate. The tree wasn't missing. It now stood dozens of steps away, surrounded by different trees than before. Soon, they noticed that several piles of rocks had also vanished. Nothing made sense. The chief believed they had simply become disoriented in the unfamiliar forest. To prove it, he ordered the hunters to create even more obvious markers. This time, they carved deeper symbols into dozens of trees, broke large branches, arranged heavy stones into circles, and tied bright strips of animal hide high above the ground. There was no possible way those signs could be mistaken. The next morning, every carving still existed, but none of them were where they had been made. The broken branches pointed in different directions. The stone circles had shifted across the forest floor. Even the strips of hide now hung from trees the hunters swore they had never touched. A quiet fear spread through the camp. The elders whispered that unseen spirits wandered the forest while humans slept. Parents refused to let their children leave the camp alone, and no one dared venture into the trees after sunset. As the nights passed, stranger things began to happen. Deep groaning sounds echoed through the darkness, not like the roar of an animal or the crash of falling trees, but long, slow sounds that seemed to rise from beneath the earth itself. Sometimes the ground trembled ever so slightly before becoming still again. The hunters searched with burning torches, but found no predators, no strangers, and no fresh footprints. It was as though the forest was changing all by itself. Then came the morning that terrified everyone. The fire pit still burned with glowing embers. Their shelters were untouched. Every tool remained exactly where it had been left. Yet the enormous boulder that had stood beside the camp the previous evening now rested behind behind a wall of trees nearly 100 steps away. The camp itself hadn't moved, but the world around it had. Panic erupted. Some wanted to flee immediately, while others argued that leaving without knowing the correct direction would only make things worse. Every hunting trail now looked unfamiliar. Every landmark seemed different, and the forest had become an endless maze. Only one member of the tribe remained calm. A young tracker named Naru had never been the strongest hunter, but he possessed something far more valuable. But what made Naru different from every other hunter? It wasn't strength, and it wasn't courage. It was a single skill that allowed him to notice what no one else could see. A discovery that would reveal the impossible truth behind the forest that seemed to move every night. I'm already working on part 2, where Naru uncovers the mystery that terrified his entire tribe. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because the answer is far stranger than anyone believed.